Last speaker's name is Elisabeth, and she grew up in New Canaan, with all the privileges and advantages that can bring, which may make her story hard to believe, but I know that addiction is an equal opportunity disease. But she has a great message to share about communication, about being present, and ultimately healing.
I grew up in New Canaan and moved here when I was a kid and had a very nice life, a very happy life, and, didn't want for anything. And we went on, vacations, and I ran the track team, and I got into my favorite college, and it was a very happy life. And that's not to say I was happy. I was always really confused why everyone around me was happy and I wasn't. My sister's off doing her thing and loving it. My brother's off doing his thing and excelling. And I was doing the same things and miserable. And I really just tried to do exactly what I should be doing. I tried to follow the path of you get good at sports, you get into the college, you get the internship, you get into the sorority. I was following all the shoulds. Miserable. And I didn't really find substance until college. In high school I did like to play Beirut and, hang out with friends. But college was when I was alone and given the freedom to judge how much I can drink. The first couple years, it was just one or two extra over the top nights. There was one stay in a hospital. There was, one time a friend had to carry me home. But for the most part, I was still doing well in school. I was still, getting into the sorority I wanted. I got that internship I wanted. And so it was fine, because if I'm doing what I should be doing, it doesn't really matter how I'm feeling. My senior year is when I was warming up in my car after a night out, and it was in the middle of November, and got a knock on the door from Mr. Officer saying, "Have you been drinking?" And while I hadn't been driving, I had the keys in the ignition, and so got a DUI. And being driven home by the officer, I decided this was it. This is the end of everything. No one's ever gotten over a DUI before, and tried to kill myself. And I called my dad at 3 a.m. and said, "Hey, could you make sure you feed my ferret and, make sure that things are all tidied up and I'll never see you again." And that was 12, 13 years ago. And it took another 10 or so years to really acknowledge that I had a problem. Because then I got into, the work business, and I was doing well there. I was getting the promotion. I was moving up. Miserable. Not understanding why everyone around me was doing great. And so the pre-gaming turned into pre-gaming, and the, drinking out with friends turned into drinking alone. And literally by the end, it was just, I had the apartment so that I could walk to work, so that I could pay for the apartment, so that I could walk to work, drinking myself into oblivion. The first seizure was a day before my sister's wedding. The final seizure was the day I got off the plane to meet the director of my rehab. So my family got together and sent me off to Malibu to rehab for 3 months, which was life-changing. My entire experience out there, 4 years, I only knew sober people. I only knew sobriety. And that was so necessary for me, because these are people that didn't know where I grew up, didn't know the shoulds, didn't have any judgment. They just knew sobriety. And out there is where I learned communication. And communication, I don't preach meetings. I don't preach abstinence. I don't preach a certain prayer or way to go about it. I preach communication. Because I've now found that the more I talk, the more other people want to talk. And the more I reach out, the more they'll reach out. And I'd say that the biggest thing I got out of my sobriety is pride of how awesome I am. I could not accept a compliment, "Your hair looks nice today," for the life of me, because you were lying, or you were just trying to get rid of me, or I was being a burden and you were trying to shut me up. And today I can say, I'm pretty awesome. I like to hang around me, and people like to be around me. And that's because I went through this program, because I reached out, and because I listened, and I've asked for help. And that for me was so huge. And that's what I'm always telling people is talk about it. I don't care what it is you have to say. I don't care who you're talking to. I don't care if it's a priest or a friend or a sponsor or your dog. Talk about what's going on. Because the more you talk, the more you hear yourself say it. The person you talk to can help to an extent. But the more you're hearing yourself, the more power you get and the more able you are to address the problem. I'm now finding it so much easier to reach out. I'm honest about my feelings, and I'll tell you when something's wrong, and I'll tell you if there's something you can do. I'm not going to lie about how I'm feeling, and I'm not going to go into the shoulds, and I'm not going to go into the what I think I should be, what I think you want to see, what I think. It's just, I'm blatant, I'm open, I'm honest, and it's so much easier to do that too, because I don't have to double check and, oh, which lie did I tell him, and how does she think I act? And so that's what recovery really brought me, is this open communication I have with parents, with siblings, with friends, with people in recovery. I moved home from California 9 or so months ago, and I was out there for 4 years, where I worked at a sober living, opened a sober living, lost that sober living in a fire, and worked another one, and just recovery became my life. And I became one of those people that I didn't make fun of, but just thought, that's awesome for them. But I'll finish this recovery thing, I'll stay sober, and I'll go back on my path. And now I'm back in New Canaan. I've opened a women's sober living. I'm not doing the ad job in New York I thought I'd be doing. And I'm happy, because it's not what I should be doing, and it's not what I think my parents want me to do, and it's not something that I have to do forever. It's for today.